new roles that don't exist at the moment, and 140,000 people to replace retirement and people who leave the industry through staff turnover. So that's quite a big challenge. 400,000, we estimate energy and utility skills that there's about 500,000 people employed in the core activities of electricity, gas, water and waste. So it's, you know, you're pretty much talking of replicating the entire energy and utilities workforce over I think this is over the next few years. So what they call out for is obviously a far more robust talent pipeline of young people. We know, and it's been widely reported, that the energy sector is largely male, pale and stale, so largely white males of a certain age group. And to back up again something that Lynn said, the key that we're working on at the moment in terms of a diversity and inclusion perspective is how we reach out into some of those disadvantaged communities. Thames Water actually doing a lot in this area. So things like requiring a degree and requiring industry experience is really going to limit the extent to which you can reach out into different ethnic minority groups and to pick up people who live in those disadvantaged areas. Having a degree, I always say, is not always a very good proxy for intelligence. If you need craft person, technician, a degree isn't the be all and end all. So how you go about resourcing can have a big impact upon your outreach activities into some of these areas. Okay, so just some very quick stats on diversity and inclusion within. So this is the power sector, so electricity generation, transmission and distribution. We can see that the proportion of young people in the sector is lower than the average across all UK sectors. Proportion age 60 plus is slightly older, although the devil is in the detail. When you drill down into some of the core engineering roles, that can be 20%, 25%. So the devil is in the detail there. Proportion of the workforce that are female is just slightly more than half of where it should be. Again, that's reflecting the dominant roles that's within the sector that are craftsperson, technician, engineering, which don't tend to have a track record of attracting female candidates. Proportion of the workforce that are from an ethnic minority is largely pitiful, particularly again in that technical engineering roles. It tends to increase in more of the support functions, HR, marketing, finance, customer service. It tends to come up a notch, but generally speaking, it's a lot lower than where it should be. And the proportion of the workforce with physical and learning disabilities is again slightly lower than it should be there. So again, working with the companies that we do, reaching out, how do we make the sector more attractive? Well, you know, clearly this is a very complicated issue. We know through educational pathways that Indian and Chinese tend to progress in droves through to higher education, whereas Black and mixed and white tend to go the more vocational route. Equally, Black and mixed don't progress very much into apprenticeships. So how you go about resourcing and trying to fill the jobs that you have will largely determine the characteristics of the people who will apply for them, and the communities that you reach out to as well. Now, clearly, when you get to ethnicity, locality and geography is a massive driver there. If you're in London, more than half of 16 to 19 people are from a non-white ethnic group. So ethnic minorities being the majority in 16 to 19-year-olds. If you go into the middle of Scotland, mid Wales, it's likely to be significantly less. So again, where you're recruiting and how you go about recruiting will have a very significant impact on your diversity and inclusion metrics through the candidates that ultimately will apply. So looking at a green recruitment over the past 12 months, this data is also from Burning Glass. We use Burning Glass through a company called Labour Insights, and I was just looking at this this morning. So using Burning Glass's definition of green jobs, which is actually quite wide, there were 177,000 jobs advertised over the past 12 months, but just 4,000 of them were in Wales. There were about 8. So 87% were in England, 8% in Scotland, and I think that was 3% in Wales, and a couple of percent in Northern Ireland. So the top occupations, the top 10 occupations listed there, project manager was top, then civil engineer, environmental scientist, mechanical engineer. So again, backing up Lynn's points, that a lot of the skills that are required within green jobs are those that are already being utilised. The context in which they are being utilised, whether it's offshore or working on energy from waste plants or in a nuclear plant. So the context might be different, but the core skills, I think we largely know. There are some areas where throughput of learners might not quite be where we want it to be, particularly environmental scientists, sustainability experts, and I'd also put electrical engineers into that. Unfortunately, electrical engineering seems to have bypassed the whole growth in the STEM world, and that's a big issue for the industry. Within the different areas of Wales, I looked at something called the location quotient, which is a measure for how for the level of demand within a locality for these jobs relative to the UK average. And what this showed was in Aberystwyth and Bangor and Holyhead, the demand for green skills was higher than average. I'm not quite sure what's going on in Aberystwyth. Bangor and Holyhead, again, I'm not an expert on what's going up there. I have heard recently that Wilfer nuclear power plant seems to be potentially making a reappearance. But interestingly, for those of you that operate in South Wales, Bridgewater, Bristol, largely around Hinkley Point, I should imagine, is a big draw for talent at the moment. Hinkley Point are about 1,400 people short on their headcount at the moment, largely driven by the different phases of construction, but also Brexit hasn't helped. And I say there's the significant demand in Scotland. Now, you might say that is miles away. What's that got to do with anything? But it depends on your perspective. Engineering skills, particularly chartered, these people are likely to be quite mobile. If they're earning 50, 60, 70,000 pounds, they might well be quite happy to travel around the country, including up to Scotland, to take on those new roles. But equally, we're seeing the world of work change, exacerbated by COVID. And we're seeing a lot of companies now implement flexible working. So just because you're based in Wales, it doesn't mean that you can't effectively be employed by an organisation probably anywhere in the world. And we're seeing a lot of talk amongst the utilities as to how they react to this new world of work. And particularly actually in some of the lower paid jobs, customer service and some of those support functions, where you no longer have to drag these people in on low salaries across large geographies, and they have to spend a relatively large percentage of their disposable income on travelling costs. Why do that when they can work remotely? So it's opened up the national labour market. Interestingly, the average advertised salary in Wales was £4,000 on a circa £4,000 lower than the UK average. I don't know how that compares across all sectors. I perhaps should have looked at that. I'll see if I can dig that out for you. But in terms of these green jobs, the average salary was somewhat lower. Now that chart that you can see bottom right just gives you a sense. So that is the total number of vacancies per month. So you can see that from 2015, things started to pick up on a very slow upward trajectory. Then COVID hit and it plummeted. But like most sectors of the economy, there's been a strong bounce back. And it's reflected there in those numbers. And that just happens to have occurred at the same time where we lose the supply of European workers. So you've got the double whammy there of a strong economic bounce back from COVID, coupled with that much more limited supply of lower and mid-range skills that naturally migrated over to the UK before they started looking for work. That has now dried up. So that's a bit of context. My next few slides are based on some interviews that we did with employers, universities, think tanks. Anyone that would talk to us basically around what are the new technologies coming into the power sector that will change what people do and how they go about doing their job and what skills they will need. And we focused on that list of technological areas there. So everything from domestic low carbon technologies like heat pumps through to the installation of electric vehicle charging points. And then in a whole range of skills, which are largely cross sector, but will absolutely drive the future success of the power sector over the next 10, 20 years or so. So in terms of domestic low carbon technologies, so this is things like heat pumps, solar photovoltaic, etc. Extremely sensitive to government policies because it's largely driven by demand from the customer. And if you look at the timeline of recruitment over the past 10, 20 years, it very accurately reflects changes in government policy. So between 2012 and 2020, there was a steady decline in the number of job postings, largely reflecting policies of the coalition, government coalition, and the Tories thereafter, but started to pick up more recently as they, well, I suppose, to relatively speaking, they seem to have found some green credentials a little bit, but that is all relative. So the numbers seem to be bouncing back up slightly. And we're seeing increased demand around project managers, the core technology specific roles. So whether they are installing sort of, as I say, heat pumps and what have you, so that the skills very much closely aligned to the specific technologies. But also labourers, reinstatement work, civils. If you're having a ground source heat pump installed, there's a lot of that labour and civil works and reinstatement works as well. So it isn't just skilled workers; it's also around those craft and construction related trades as well. But the evidence seems to be that by the back end of the 2020s, workforce levels will begin to reduce and then start to settle as we settle into that more longer term maintenance and repair rather than new installs. In terms of the installation of electric vehicle charging points, this is split into two. So you've got the public charge points. That is largely driven by local authorities. And then you've got the domestic installations on domestic properties, which is largely driven by customer demand, again linked to government policies and subsidies. So the way that we see this workforce developing is that, generally speaking, you have to be a qualified electrician in order to install and sign off the installation of an EV charging point. So that's a level 3 qualification, which is something that can take 2 or 3 years to achieve. We're currently working with BEIS to see if there is a way that we can reduce that time scale, so that the industry is more able to increase its workforce in a shorter time span. But we think this workforce will develop in possibly 3 different ways. One is there will be a dedicated EV installer workforce, and they will do nothing but install EV charging points. Then you've got a kind of a multi-skilled electrician plus type workforce that will do domestic wiring, as well as have the skills and the wherewithal to install EV charging points when required to do so. But there will also be a low carbon installer workforce. BEIS are looking at the concept of a low carbon skills card. So you can pick up different competencies in terms of, yes, I've done the training and I'm qualified to install PV, heat pump and electric vehicle charging points. And that will be on your skills card. So it's kind of a skills passport, just like many aspects of the energy sector and the water sector and the gas sector already have. Number of support functions also increasing in demand. So the technical customer service staff, normally the first port of call when someone contacts an organisation about possibly wanting an EV. So these aren't just customer service; they'll have technical knowledge as well. Installation auditors to do random spot checks of installs. May not need to be a fully qualified electrician, just do enough so they can find and detect faults. Linking into then that maintenance workforce as well. If things go wrong or something's not charging properly, then that fault finding and repair workforce can be quickly deployed as well. So that little chart at the bottom shows the number of job postings per year for job roles relating to EV charging point installation. So you can see from, well, if you can see, if you've got better eyes than me, that's about 2019, things really started to take off. And with government policies around no new internal combustion engines sold from 2030, so the demand for both domestic and public sited charging points will continue to grow, and it's going to be a big challenge for the industry as to how it gets this workforce within a timely manner. Because if it is the case that everyone has to be a fully qualified electrician, then you've got at least a 3-year time lag there. So we're currently working with organisations to see what we can do in that space. Digital and data literacy, obviously, in all things this area, this now is going across the workforce. So not just people who increase or were sort of worked in digital areas or in data areas, sort of in their own little silos. We're now looking at digital skills across the workforce. So if you're a craftsperson out out in the field, the way that you deliver jobs and the way that you fault find and the way that you report back on your jobs is increasingly through handhelds, laptops, tablets. So having that digital literacy is now crucial. Not easy when you've got a reasonable portion of those of that workforce being of a certain age. The companies are reporting slight difficulties or a lengthening of the training required to upskill those people. They may not be the most naturally gifted in terms of digital and IT skills. Equally in data, more and more job roles, more and more people are having to make decisions based on data. because we're getting data in off the assets about performance, we're getting data in from customers, and more people are having to make decisions based on data that's coming across their desk. And that is a skill in itself. So knowing the provenance of the data, where does it come from? How is it being put together? How should I interpret this data for different functions? So there's a data literacy element as well. And just to cover off cybersecurity, I think everyone is working on cybersecurity at the moment across the utilities. But that is an ongoing and is a given. Artificial intelligence and data science. So energy companies using AI in a number of different ways in terms of optimizing and their schedule and the automation of operations. Using it to look at when maintenance might be required. So doing that predictive maintenance ahead of when something actually goes wrong, looking at demand management. So the skills needed for this are already known, and there's a supply of them in the market. The challenge appears to be that if you gain a new person from another sector or straight out of university with these skills, how do you give them the sector intelligence that they need relating to the data that they are going to use? So we're working with companies at the moment around how we can upskill and assimilate these workforce into the power sector as quickly as possible. The demand for data scientists has gone up by 230% over the past 5 years, and so these people are in demand across a range of sectors, and also a lot of sectors which pay probably a lot more than your average energy and utility company does. So the challenges seem to be, one, attraction, and two, assimilating them into the sector as quickly as possible. In terms of automation, we're looking here, at least in the short term, around, it's essentially algorithms. It's algorithms to interpret the data that's coming off the assets from customers. So it isn't replacing people yet in terms of automation, but it's enabling them to do their job possibly more accurately, quicker, etc. We then are predicting that probably by the late 20s, we then start to get into a point where automation could actually start overtaking people's jobs or creating new jobs in different areas. Now, in those first two phases, it's interesting that probably most of automation would well take place in the job roles where more of the female workforce are employed. So we're largely talking it's sales, customer service, finance roles, those support function, head office support function roles. So something that we need to keep an eye on is the extent to which, through the 2020s, automation is actually having a negative effect on some of our diversity and inclusion indicators. And then we think it'll be more into the mid 2030s when automation really starts to kick in, and there is then a substantial change in how the workforce interacts with the tasks that it needs to do. In terms of augmented reality and virtual reality, at the moment, this is largely in a training environment. So rather than sending your apprentice up a 200-foot wind turbine in the middle of the North Sea, you can do it virtually. But we are starting to see more and more technologies coming through around the workforce out in the field, where they can hover a tablet over the pavement and they'll be able to see where the pipes are, where the wires are, the cables, etc., hopefully reducing the number of power hits. So we are starting to see some of those new technologies being introduced, hence the need for that digital literacy I mentioned a few slides ago. By the way, the water industry seems to be quite active in that area. So although these technologies will be developed by technology experts, energy and utility companies and green companies need to be essentially an intelligent customer. You need to know what problem you're trying to solve, and you need to be able to articulate that and work with the technology developers so that you're able to meet the challenge. But you won't necessarily have to develop the technologies yourself. Cybersecurity and IT specialists, the big challenge here is more in the area of demand. There's demand from across the economy. So how are you as individual organizations and as sectors going to promote the opportunities that you've got to these people when they've probably got the economy as their market? So again, coming back to some of those the way that you engage with the communities and with different sections of the communities, and particularly using apprenticeships to grow your own. There are lots of different apprenticeships. So what we're trying to do with energy companies is not just is break them out the mindset that apprenticeships are just for craft and technical, but for lines persons, for cable jointers, etc. What about supply chain management? What about cyber and data and digital? There's a whole plethora of different apprenticeships.
Rob, could I just give you a 2-minute warning, please? Is that okay?
Sure.
Just a 2-minute warning, thank you.
Yeah, so all this then links in for us around smart networks. So the networks being the electricity, gas, water networks. So we've got a range of new engineering roles coming to the fore, and we're investigating just the potential for a smart meter technician apprenticeship. So very quickly on conclusions, we're going to see very heavy demands. It's a tight labour market. It will stay tight, particularly in these technology areas. Partly because it takes a while to alter the training provision to get new green skills, and partly because a lot of the skills that are required in a lot of other sectors of the economy. So we need to really think about how we can expand the labour market in which you are recruiting. So how do you reach out to different ethnic minorities, more to females and non-binary? How do you reach out into disadvantaged communities? And what are the possibilities for recruiting neurodiverse people? GCHQ do some good apprenticeships with people with dyslexia and autism, because they see the world differently, they see trends differently, they see data differently. And finally, I think, yes, finally, what we're working with the utilities. So there's a whole discussion about making your workforce resilient. Well, how do you know what you're doing is making it more resilient? The sector doesn't do enough, I think, in terms of measuring the various characteristics of its workforce and benchmarking that against peers and industry averages. So that's what we're working with at the moment through the Skills Academy, to try and help companies with a framework for how they can measure various aspects of their attraction, skills development and retention of their workforce. And I shall breathe. And if there are any questions, I'll happily take.
Thank you ever so much, Rob. Yeah, well, people are formulating a question. Let me just pick up on the what's happening in Aberystwyth question that you dangled earlier, because Aberystwyth is my local town, and there's a number of things happening there. One, we've got the Centre of Alternative Technology not far away, of course, which is to the north of Aberystwyth, but the university itself is doing a lot of work, because we're an area of very, very clean air, and they're doing a lot of work with spectrum stuff. So that may well be part of what the demand is, but it's obviously an area of innovation, because it's got a university here. And I know that we've got got Professor Wendy Deering on the call from University of Wales Trinity St David, who may also be able to shed some light as to what's happening in this particular space that's driving that particular demand for that skill set in this area. Rob, that was fascinating. Thank you. I was really interested to see this sort of 260,000 new roles not yet in existence. And as a career coach and professional myself, it begs the question, how do we help prepare people for roles we don't yet know what they're going to be like? Have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? It's very much chicken and egg. We're working with companies to look at what their training requirements will be, but until you know what new technologies specifically coming along, it's difficult to develop the training program until someone knows what's required. So I think for me, this is my view. It's about those core competencies. It's about so the specific technologies that come along. As far as I see, that's where the employees will pick it up. They'll develop the new technology or buy the new technology in and upskill the workforce as required. I think on the supply side of things, it's about drumming up that interest and highlighting the opportunities and making sure that we've got those core competencies in STEM, in engineering, in environmental sciences, but also some of the support functions as well. And it isn't just about engineers. The green industry is massively reliant, as we're seeing at the moment with HGV drivers, on craft and operative roles. So again, it's about making those attractive and drumming on that interest. That there's a whole range of opportunities here.
Thank you very much for that. I've just had a comment here from Michelle, who said, I was just thinking the same thing, Carolyn. How do we meet demand so quickly? Perhaps the new curriculum in Wales will help to allow us to plant the seeds in a much younger age group and highlight green key roles for the future. And I think that's a really helpful place to bring this section to a close and say thank you very much, Rob. That was a very detailed and interesting perspective on a sector that I have to confess I don't know a huge amount. And the LMI knows particularly welcome, I'm sure, for all of us as practitioners, that we can go, well, actually, there's a big opportunity here for you, young person developing, and see have a little look at that. So thank you very much indeed. And I hope you have enjoyed your first visit to the forum so far. That brings me to the third. Thank you very much. That brings me to the third presenter today. We'll have a break after Bronwen. Interesting that we've talked so far about skills and sectors and what people are looking for, but what Bronwen's going to be focusing on is very much looking at how you get the different parts of our economy in terms of individuals. We know there are 5 generations in the workforce for the first time ever now, and how do we get those working well and that commitment to green. Now, Bronwen has been struggling with a cold, so I'm really glad she's here, because last night it was a bit touch and go, but I think her voice has held in there, which is great. Bronwen's MD of Anti-Cymru Enterprise. That's a £4 million social enterprise based in Mid Wales, and it provides support for startups and growth for businesses, delivering Business Wales advice service on behalf of Welsh Government in Mid Wales, West Wales and North Wales. And I know from a fact, because I sit on their board, but privileged to sit on their board, that there's a lot of work done by Antia to help young people into self-employment through schemes like New Starts, New Skills, New Skills, New Start, and also Kickstart. They support young entrepreneurs through the Welsh Government Big Ideas programme, have a range of commercial and specialist business consultancy services, and they also, we've heard this mentioned before, wind farms. They manage the Brechfa wind farm project, which is a community project, which is giving huge value, in excess of £1 million back into the community locally, in an area where you definitely see more trees than houses and more chimney pots. Bronwen herself is a solicitor by training, very entrepreneurial in her thinking, hence what she does now. She's run several successful fleet management and distribution businesses, is a trained champion for equality, diversity and inclusion, and is also big into smart towns. So it's a great pleasure to be able to welcome you as our third speaker today, Bronwen, talking about the generational divide. Over to you, if you can unmute and pop your slides up, and we look forward to hearing all about your view on the world in terms of this generational divide. do you just want to unmute? There you go.
Okay, are those slides?
They are
up?
visible. Yeah.
Excellent. Right. Okay. Right. Thank you very much. And thank you for the speakers who've gone before me. I've had probably one of the worst 40 minutes of my life in the lead up to this, in that I have substantially rewritten the content I was going to talk to you about today. So much excellent content has been covered by the previous speakers that I've cut and slashed this presentation quite substantially. So there is a little bit of winging it going on today. So I'm hoping that I can bring still some meaningful content to you. It might not be quite as well laid out as some of my fellow speakers. Okay, so we wanted to look at the impact of the generational divide in the workplace. So, and how the green agenda helps so substantially with that. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about comes from a book written by a lady called Jenny Williams, who is a consultant who works in Wales, that's worked very closely with Welsh Government and has written an excellent book called How Millennials Can Wow at Work. So I've included quite a lot of content from her material, but I'm not going to dwell overly on this, as I appreciate that I am somewhat speaking to the converted, and this forum is very well informed on that agenda. But I'd like just to take a moment to stop and think about kind of why I'm here today. As I've said, many of the speakers before, the two speakers before, have covered off quite a lot of the content, and even in the introduction, Karen has told you quite a lot about me and maybe why I'm here. So that's another bit of my content gone, but we shall press on nonetheless. So as an organisation, we employ about 90 people in the Midwest and North Wales community. And during the time that I've worked here, we've definitely seen a number of challenges that have arisen in terms of, you know, the new generation in the workplace and the cross-generational issues that have been much discussed. And my concern is those issues are potentially becoming more entrenched. I've also worked to mentor a young person in the workplace, in another workplace, and that's really brought that home to me, the difference in expectations between people of my generation and the younger generation. And that's been absolutely brought home. I am a mum to one generation Xer and 2 generation Zs, and oh my goodness, don't they have a different expectation about career development and the career journey than people my generation. I'm a little bit being a bit cute describing myself as a business advisor. I haven't actually worked on the ground as a business advisor for some time, but nevertheless, I'm in quite close contact with a lot of businesses in our region. And a couple of observations that arise out of that. I absolutely agree, by the way, that's another question answered, Carolyn. I absolutely agree with that understanding about maybe what's happening in Aberystwyth. We see some great work coming out of CAT, and the work that Centre for Alternative Technology has done has spun out quite a few new start businesses that have got a real green focus. And they are also offering some really excellent masters in sustainable construction. So we've seen a real uplift in activity in that region. So that might explain some of Rob's questions a little. However, back to the original topic, talking to different businesses in our region, I'm not sure there is always a good understanding of that generational divide piece. I think there is still quite a lot of work to do, particularly in the sector that we're operating in with it, which is the SME sector. And we know the SME sector, responsible as it is for over 60% of jobs in Wales, is really important if we're going to get this, this generational divide well addressed. There is a very, very strong understanding of the skills shortages, but maybe that's not being quite aligned to the general generational divide issues that we will talk very briefly about. From our perspective as an employer, apart from the issues around different generations, one thing which is quite clear is that it's quite difficult to recruit in some of the sectors we might think of as green. So we deliver the Business Wales contract in Mid and North Wales, and we actually employ specifically qualified environmental consultants, and they will work with businesses to look at how they implement environmental best practice measures, how they monitor their performance against it. And I have to say, it's quite difficult to recruit people in our community with the appropriate skills. Over and above that work that we do, we also do some work around the Smart Towns agenda, as Carolyn has alluded to. And we are increasingly working in the LoRaWAN agenda. And what these two projects do is they use data to look at various performance indicators. So in terms of town Wi-Fi, we look at footfall through our towns. LoRaWAN, as many of you will know, is a wide area network solution that allows data capture, a very simple data capture that can be used to monitor a series of environmental indicators. And from our position in Wales, those again are roles that are difficult to fill. So I'm completely in alignment with Rob's view about the need for more digital skills, but also the need for more data management skills. One of the challenges we've come across in terms of implementing some of our activity is in terms of town Wi-Fi, sometimes that data analysis skill isn't there in the towns. So completely agree with what Rob has had to say on that. Okay, so we just basically read it in the very simplest sense, some of this kind of generational theory. So we know we've got these 5 generations in the workplace. I think, as I said earlier, there is quite a misunderstanding or a lack of realization of A, the generations, and B, the potential conflict or challenge that can present. I'll put that picture there of Billy Idol up because I think quite a lot of people aren't quite sure maybe what generation they're sitting in. We know there's a bit of latitude and a bit of slip with the dates. They're not all completely confirmed. And I use that as a little bit of a test. If you're old enough to remember that Billy Idol was in Generation X, then you are definitely a baby boomer, by the way, as is Billy himself. We know about the other people that are increasingly prominent in our workplace and the issues we have around the different cultural markers and backgrounds that they came from. And even as we're welcoming Generation Z into the workplace, we are aware of that emergence of Generation Alpha, which is the nomiker that's been applied to the generation currently still in study. And we know, as is inevitable, that the percentage contribution from those younger millennial age groups in terms of our overall population is going to carry on getting bigger and bigger, and that's just plain common sense. What has surprised me is both in speaking to employers through the Business Wales service, but also doing quite a lot of close work with employers through the Kickstart project, was that there is quite a lot of misunderstanding and negativity potentially, and very stereotypical assumptions that some of our business owners and managers have around millennial people. And I'm sure that you're very familiar with a lot of these comments. I was surprised to hear them stated maybe as widely as they have been, and I think the two that have really stood out in recent conversations are observations about maybe people that are very ambitious but aren't necessarily putting the work in. We all understand the background to that, and maybe the falsehood that that's based upon. But something that I've heard a lot from SMEs recently is concerns over the soft skills of millennial people. I'm sure that this forum is very, very familiar with the views that that flow the other way, and the concerns about how millennials are managed by their line managers or leaders, that they're not getting the support they need to grow and develop their talents, that they often end up with very menial work that doesn't stretch them, that they're not often called to collaborate, and maybe some of their experience, their knowledge isn't recognised, and so that can lead to a feeling of young people being unsupported in their career development. So again, I'm sure you're very familiar with what millennials are looking for from the workplace. So they are seeking to develop their skills. They want to be, they want to make an impact actually in the workplace. To do that in a collaborative way with their other members of their team, but equally, and probably as importantly, if not more importantly, this sense of contributing to society as a whole. So I think there's a real piece of work for us to do, and I say we as in us as a business support organisation, and also the wider career development community, to work with employers to help them understand what we mean by a meaningful contribution to work, what the company is here to do, and how it is either through the products and services it delivers or through its approach to work, really delivering against a series of agendas. I was very, very interested to hear that discussion around whether we're still talking CSR or we're looking at new nomenclatures for how that kind of responsible business practice, as Welsh Government would call it, approach is delivered. So what can we do to support businesses to do that? And I think culture means everything in this workplace. And many young people feel that adherence to traditional values within how things have been delivered previously, it is stifling and it's not supporting their growth within the business. So how do we help the employer to understand that? And again, we know that being able to customize their work life and personalize their work experience is really, really important to young people. And we've had some interesting conversation about the value proposition, the employment value proposition. So again, that needs to be a priority in terms of how we enable businesses to best deliver to this new generation. Because it's not just my observation that's saying that this stuff isn't necessarily working for us. So there's been a report by Deloitte that talks very much, reiterates that fact that purposeful value-based careers are really, really important for people, but actually a lot of people aren't feeling satisfied in this respect. So 2 out of 3 millennials say that purpose is the main reason they chose the organisation they now work for. But rather sadly, only 1 in 5 millennials actually believe that the organisation they work for is delivering with purpose. And of course, we know what that means, that millennials, they're a different breed of people. They're more likely to move in search of that satisfaction. In fact, they're 3 to 4 times more likely to leave an organisation if they're not experiencing that meaningful work. And the other thing that is that the Deloitte report absolutely highlights is this is a much more kind of entrenched in young people's thinking, that millennials are much less satisfied in this regard than other generations. So we've talked today about the importance of the green agenda and future roles and jobs that might emerge in alignment with the commitment to green. But I would say we also need to think about that very much internally as well, in terms of the impact that a good green performance can have for attracting and retaining our staff. And I think it's really important to pick up on what was discussed earlier about that must be real and meaningful, and the whole concept of greenwashing is obviously very, very alienating to this generation. This figure, I must admit, really surprised me, that nearly half of millennials and Generation Z people are more attracted to making a positive impact in society and communities than starting a family and having kids. And to me, that really encapsulates this different way of thinking. We talked about 70% of millennials prefer to work in a company with a strong sustainability agenda. We've referenced in some of the earlier presentations. I'm very, very pleased to hear Lynn say that whilst 3/4 of millennials are prepared to take a smaller salary, actually they don't need to. But that again speaks to that level of commitment. So in terms of meaningful work, the green agenda, if we can get employers to genuinely engage in a meaningful, monitored and evaluated way, the green agenda can really help the SMEs in Wales attract and retain the millennial generation. So this is where we start to get a bit freefall now. I've changed some of the slides, bear in mind some of the content that's gone before. So I've been working on and off as a business advisor in Wales, or been very closely related to it for the last 20 years. And we have definitely seen amongst the SME population a changing perception around the whole CSR agenda. So in my early days as a business advisor, I was actually a quality advisor, and it was a very, very, very hard sell. Every year that sell is getting significantly easier. So whilst there might not be a recognition of the generational impacts in the workplace from SME employers, there is an awakening around the need to engage with various aspects of responsible business practice agendas. I just don't think that linkage is being made between those two issues, between attracting, managing and retaining and the value add. I don't think, and kind of meaningful work. I don't think that connection is being made, certainly at the smaller end of the SME population. What we are seeing, though, absolutely, is a much greater awareness and engagement amongst new entrepreneurs. So people who are starting businesses have always, that's always been a great time to talk to people about these agendas, but it's less of us making that sale now. There's a lot more natural interest, as I guess our entrepreneurial people are getting younger and younger. I guess a less positive thing that we are seeing is that COVID has, to an extent, made a bit of a dent in that. So very recent reports we're getting from delivery on the ground is that businesses at the minute are struggling very much with survival. Now, we hope that's going to be a short-term issue, and once a certain amount of stability has been achieved, that they will again be able to re-engage with this agenda. But currently, we're actually seeing quite a significant drop in people coming forward and engaging with the business advice services. So there is a real feeling at the minute people are focusing on getting by and focusing on the day-to-day. So what can we do? What can we do to support businesses to get on board with this agenda and clearly communicate it? So I'm going to say very obviously, this is about creating very, very clear mission, vision and value statements. And certainly a lot of the businesses we're working with don't have that. So not only creating those statements, however, but making sure that there is a strong strategic alignment through all the business operational areas. And let's not overlook the really important role of culture, as we've said in all of this, because culture matters to our younger generations. And when I say we need to have a close strategic alignment, I think this particularly impacts in terms of we need a very, very close coupling with our HR strategy and our responsible business practice strategies. So we've talked about the value proposition being really clear. We've talked about making sure that young people entering into the workplace are also supported to have a very clear understanding of what is expected of them, that they have a clear definition of functional and behavioural competencies, and they get the feedback they want. So as well as considering closely aligning our environmental policies and practices, we also need to make sure there's that good strong coupling with our HR strategy, so that we are making sure people are properly supported once we've attracted them in, and are getting regular feedback on their performance, but also on the performance of the organisation against their environmental strategies. There's been a lot of talk today about future skills, and I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to talk about that. But obviously, we need to make sure that the HR strategy properly enables that link between our future vision and really scoping what skills are going to be needed in the workplace right now to deliver against that. And we made to make sure that all of these strategies are brought down, right down into our performance management techniques and structures, so that we are evaluating people against their performance, against responsible business practice solutions that we've already identified in the mission, vision and values, that is actually dropped right down into the appraisal templates. And equally, that we take the same robust evaluation and management approach to measuring the impacts of our environmental strategies, which is quite hard to do. And I know that I'm running out of time, so I'm going to be very quick. As I said, I work for Business Wales, or our company delivers on behalf of Business Wales. So we do actually have expert staff within the organisation that can support with that, that can advise and adjust all responsible business practice solutions for different sizes of organisations. You've got the Business Wales contact details there, and the delivery can range from a pledge through to a good understanding of what Welsh Government's economic contract compliance mean, and as I said, up around policy development and monitoring. Lots of opportunities as well to examine different accreditation opportunities and codes of conduct. So just before Carolyn kicks me off, I'm just going to say, I think as a closing, as a closing thought, things we've been concerned about in the in terms of COVID impact, pre-COVID, things we've been concerned about around the different positions of our different generations in the workplace. We need to be quite clear that actually COVID has impacted the younger generation much more substantially. We've talked about, we can see evidence here that Generation Z workers have said that their work-life balance has been negatively affected, particularly important when we think about how relevant that is to them. And there's a lot of worry about financial stability, a generation that's already carrying a debt load. Equally, the workplace is changing. We've seen many more people working remotely. Remote working has positive and negative impacts, but the negative impacts are more widely felt by the younger generation, in that they don't get access to the same career development, the same support and learning. And Karen has dropped in the chat for me a couple of articles, one that looks at an academic paper that looks at the impact of remote working. And I just remind everybody that we are aware that the younger generation is more impacted by loneliness than older generations. And again, there's a document in the chat to support that. So I hope there's some information there that you've found of interest, both in terms of our delivery and how we can work to support businesses overcome some of the challenges.
Thank you very much. And now I'm sitting here embarrassedly trying to find the other document, which is sitting on my desktop. I will drop it. There we go. There's the second one into the chat now. They're both there. Thank you very much, Bronwen. Really, really interesting. And I was sitting there listening to you, and I just jotted down a question that was, is vision, mission, and value and measurement of them enough to make the employer value proposition sticky enough to retain people who really want to make a difference? Now, that's a question I might just leave hang there as we go into a break for Bronwen now, which I'm sure she'll take. Otherwise, drop them in the chat box over the break and we'll pick up with that Q&A before we move on to our final speaker. We can have a 5-minute break. We are running slightly behind time, apologies for which, but if we're right for a 5-minute break now, have a think about what it is you want to come back and ask Bronwen about. And we'll see you back in 5 minutes. Time to grab a quick cup of tea before we then go final presentation from Kath, who is sitting there very patiently, and then we'll go into some breakout for more discussion. So see you back here very shortly. 5-minute break. See you in a bit. So, doesn't 5 minutes fly when you're having fun? Welcome back, everybody, to the last part of today, before we actually do some networking. I'm absolutely really keen, if there are any questions for Bronwen, that you do remember to ask those now. Angela, I love the dog. What's it called? Do put your speaker on. Go on, tell us what the dog's called.
I'm sorry, this is Teddy. He was enthralled also, and he wanted to join the meeting, so I put him on briefly.
Teddy, why not? Welcome to the forum. It's always good to have new joiners. I'll have to bring the Daxons in next time. And it's lovely to see you here as well. Any questions for Bronwen at all from there? You can obviously reach Bronwen afterwards, but I see Natalie's already saying, love the dog. Excellent. So it's producing some response. It's good to see people are back. Any questions for Bronwen? That was, I think, really interesting. There are lots of things to think about there. I'm beginning to feel like my question was a little bit like swallowing a dictionary, though. And this employer value proposition, really, we are getting terribly American in the way we're talking these days, aren't we? RSG, EVP, how does all that work? I don't know. DSO and BAR, another set of 3-letter acronyms. Anyway, any questions for Bronwen? If not, I'm going to say thank you very much, Bronwen. I know that you'd be happy to answer anything by email, and your contact details are in there. So anything you want to pick up with Bronwen afterwards, please do. Meanwhile, because I said 5 minutes, I set a timer, and we've got a lot of cameras off. So if you could just tell me if you're back, would be quite helpful, because I'd really rather not be talking to the 5 of us that have got camera. And I know Angela's there, Michelle's there. Nice to see you, Michelle. Camera's on. Why not? Hello, Rob. Angela's popped the dog in for a quick hello as well. And the screen's moving around. Now that's playing clever tricks on me. David's back in the room, and Tanner's here. Excellent. And we've got Andy. Nice to see you, Andy. It's very good to see faces, isn't it? It's a bit more exciting than black corners with a little red bit with a mic off with a name. It's quite hard, that. So it's nice to see some faces back up. There's a face on here who's new to the forum, and I know has had to wait very patiently for a slightly late start to her session. Apologies from me on that, Kath. But we know that you're going to say something that's really interesting, and it's the very first time we've had in the forum somebody from an employer perspective acting as a live business case. And I think that's really important, really exciting, because although we talked about the 3 pillars of good practice and theory and all of that, we have to contextualize and keep in touch with what's happening and reflect that back in our practice and our discussions. So I'm really excited to have you here today, representing a hugely rapidly, and people hear just how rapidly growing organisation that is serving Wales proud, is leading across the UK, and your numbers of growth are quite phenomenal. So it's really lovely to have you here. Just a little bit of background before Kath takes us through what Crunch Digital Media do, because I know you're going to take care of that for me, thank goodness. Because there's lots of stuff around TikTok, Spotify, Google, Ecosia, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Bing, Spotify, LinkedIn, Xander, and Snapchat, some of which are not familiar to me. So I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more about that.
You've done well.
Yeah, then. It's amazing what you get off somebody's LinkedIn profile, I'll tell you, Kath. Okay, so Kath, in her LinkedIn profile, if you go and have a look at it, and I'm sure she'd be welcome, very happy to connect with you, as all our speakers would be. She did a business degree, funny enough, from University of Wales, Trinity St David, Wendy, if you're still there, and started her career as a DWP benefits advisor. So you've worked at the sharp end of some of the work that some of our members get involved in, then moved into payroll and finance, and then ended up for a couple of years being what you codedly put in your LinkedIn profile as business support officer, which turns out to be working at Park Prison, supporting substance misusers during their 12-week period coming out of jail. And then moved into customer service for a life insurance company. I'm sure there's a joke I could make there somewhere, but I'm not going to go anywhere near that, having seen the delights of the John Lewis commercial today, which still has my head slightly puzzled. Anyway, let's come back to this. You joined Crunch just over 4 years ago. You've been spearheading some of their growth as their head of delivery. And you've also got another role, haven't you, which is looking after Swansea University's social media recruitment work. So recruiting people into postgrad and undergrad degrees, which would be really interesting to hear a bit more about as well. So a very warm welcome from us, Kath. I know you're going to be talking to us about hybrid working and career development for young employees, which follows on very easily and naturally from some of the generational theory that Bronwen was talking about. A very warm welcome to you. Over to you. Do you want to share your slides?
Yeah.
And then we'll kick off. So I'm going to mute now and look forward to hearing from you.
There you go. Just want to check that you can see that okay.
Perfect.
I thought I would be the one to have a technical difficulties.
No, no,
I
but
thought it was going to happen.
It's here in the pink.
Okay. Right. So first of all, thanks for having me and thank you for joining us today. So as already discussed, we're going to look at a case study from Crunch just to tell you about how we've combined hybrid working and career development for young employees. So a little bit more about me, I should say. So my name is Catherine. I work for Crunch Digital Media as head of delivery. I manage the delivery team, which is made up of 12 employees, all under the age of 24. For most of the team members, this is their first job. They join Crunch at a time when we are either fully working from home or at the very start of a hybrid working environment. Just a little bit about Crunch now. At Crunch, we specialise in digital advertising for the education and recruitment industry. Over the last year and a half, we've acquired a number of new clients for sectors including e-commerce, leisure and finance. With over 300 clients and our love of all things data, we pride ourselves on building campaigns based on meaningful insights and market knowledge. It has been an incredible few years for Crunch, and as you can see, we've picked up a number of awards on our journey. At the beginning of this year, we were actually named the best place to work in Wales within the digital industry, an amazing achievement which we are all very proud of. Crunch HQ is based in Swansea, and you can see here on the map that we've also got an office in Warwick, along with 2 new premises in Cardiff and Bristol. We are preparing to launch in America, and we've also got plans for a Dubai and Sydney office for the new year. Here you can see that our number of employees has grown by a staggering 256% since the start of the pandemic in March 2020. That meant to us that we had 57 employees working to our hybrid model, and 41 of them have been trained fully with very little in-person contact. So what is hybrid to us? Prior to March 2020, as a company, we'd never considered remote working. At first, it was everyone work from home. Then as the work from home guidance changed, we introduced hybrid working. To us, hybrid working is not restricted to working from home. As long as our employees have the tools to complete their work, who are we to say where they need to do it from? What did we need to make it work? With the majority of the team never stepping foot in Crunch HQ, we conducted our interviews online and had new starter equipment ordered and delivered to their home address via Amazon. We introduced an instant message software, Slack, which is encouraged to be used for informal messages and group chats. And of course, we continue to use Outlook. Access to work assessments were also offered to employees who have a disability or health condition, and equipment was purchased in line with assessment outcomes. With anything new, of course, there are always some challenges which we need to overcome. Our training plan for new starters consists of 6 months intense training on a number of platforms, including Facebook, TikTok, Spotify, and Snapchat. With us not being in the same environment as new starters, it was very hard for us to judge how they were feeling, if they were getting on with everyone, and to generally get a sense of how they were doing. The water cooler chat moments were non-existent, and every conversation was scheduled. I know from thinking way back to the normal office days, as soon as I would leave the office, the team would start chatting about non-work topics. We needed to recreate the manager not there situations so the team could chat, get to know each other and bond. We encouraged Slack groups to be created without the managers so the team could freely have those non-work conversations. Regular manager check-ins are scheduled, and we've also set up a buddy rota system. Of course, we couldn't forget about our existing staff. We circulated a staff feedback survey in September. At that point, we were 6 months into home working, so we wanted to know how we were doing. The outcome of the survey was that employees were sick of company-wide Zoom meetings, which at that point were happening 3 times a week. Where we thought we were being good managers by checking in, the reality was that employees thought they were a waste of time. Now managers regularly communicate with their teams, and we have a company-wide call just once a week. It was identified as a concern from managers that teams were starting earlier, finishing later, and not taking breaks when working from home. We asked all staff to block out a reoccurring event on their calendars to prompt them to take a break. A staggering number of employees stated that they would like to work flexible hours. We trialled working 8 hours a day between the hours of 8 and 6. Productivity, efficiency, and morale increased. Staff have also reported that finishing early or starting later has given them that nudge to attend events outside of work. We held career reviews with all employees and put in place training plans in line with what the employee wants to achieve. I am delighted to say that every single member of the delivery team is now working to an accredited qualification in digital marketing, and they've been given paid time off work to complete their course. As discussed earlier, our employee numbers in Crunch has grown a lot, so much so at the moment we would not be able to fit all employees in the Crunch office. Hybrid working has allowed us as a business to continue operating without the need of purchasing a larger office space and incurring the costs that come with that. Even though employees may not be working from the office, health and safety still applies and employment law still applies. With so many changes in the government guidance, we needed our HR support more than ever. We are very fortunate to have Julie Grabham of JG HR Solutions as our HR consultant. Julie supported us with all the questions we had, updated, created policies, along with holding introduction meetings with both existing and new employees. In order for hybrid to work, we needed to plan and ensure the office was a safe environment that the Crunch team felt comfortable attending. We purchased a laptop for every employee of Crunch to make the home office split easier. It was getting very tiresome carrying the big PC tower and the monitors back and forth to the office. COVID risk assessments were not only carried out on the Crunch office, but also throughout the shared building. We introduced an office schedule to make sure that there were never too many people in the office on any one day. An introduction to Crunch video was recorded, which gives a warm welcome and a department breakdown, along with policy, procedure, and key contact information. This video is supplied to all new members of staff on induction. We also done a walkthrough video to show staff how the office was set up and the safety precautions that have been put in place to ease any anxiety that some may have had about returning to an office environment. This video was about 10 minutes long, but I've trimmed it down to just a minute because I just wanted to give you a little glimpse of what we've done.
We're not hearing your sound there. You might just need to play it with your speakers up.
Oh dear.
So it's a comment. It happens sometimes. Do you want to talk us through over what the image is showing?
Yeah, bear me a sec. Let me just see if I can do it quickly.
Don't worry, take your time. We all have moments, don't we, where we go, oh no, not the tech again. It's one of the vagaries of the work we all do these days.
Okay, no, it's not working in terms of the video sound. So, but basically all you can see here, we laid it all out. Everything was sanitized, different calculators for everybody. thermometer to do the temperature checks, masks, gloves, tissues. So this part here was just to show where the secure storage was, and the office looked very different because of course we needed to make sure there was enough space in between everybody. So there we are. Sorry, I could hear the video then through my headphones. So I hope you could understand me as I was talking through it. We didn't take into account just how many of our employees would be working from their
Don't worry,
bedrooms.
Kath, it happens. It's happened to all of us.
We didn't take into account just how many of our employees would be working from their bedroom when working from home. It became quickly apparent, thanks to Zoom, but a high number of staff didn't have a spare room or a kitchen to work from, as they either lived with their parents or were in shared accommodation. In light of this, we teamed up with Hayley Wheeler, an emotional therapist, to offer employees access to wellbeing support. Our HR consultant created a Crunch wellness policy and also put us in touch with wellbeing services, which staff are given paid time off to attend. Instead of second guessing what our young employees want, we asked them. As most of the Crunch team did not have the opportunity to participate in work experience placements prior to joining us, we asked them what they thought would help others in the same situation. The answers given, as you can see, have identified a range of support the young people want to feel more prepared to enter the working world. It is quite interesting here that when we conducted our reviews, everybody came across highly confident during interviews, and not one of them mentioned any of these topics until I just sent this question out to them on email. Anxiety about forming relationships was a common theme when we asked what was the hardest thing about working away from the office when starting a new job. We've taken these answers on board and have made it compulsory for employees to attend the office twice a week. On the first day of employment, it is arranged that the new employees' immediate team colleagues will be in the office to welcome them and work alongside them and to also show them around the building. I have been in a leadership position in Crunch for 4 years. I've noticed over the last 2 years that young employees are very clear that they want to progress, succeed, and they are also highly career driven. They are well and truly looking to the future, even in their first jobs. Within the delivery team, introducing both short-term and long-term progression milestones has given the team a boost in energy and focus. As with any company, training new employees costs money, time, and energy. The recruitment of trained and experienced employees in the digital industry is highly competitive. Prior to us making career development plans a focus for all levels of staff, we did have a high number of staff completing the Crunch training and then being headhunted by other digital employers. Refocusing our efforts on not just training, but mentoring and leading has increased our staff retention rate, which in turn has kept the talent within the business. Before we come to an end, I would like to quickly show you how our nurturing our talent approach has worked. Josh came to Crunch HQ for his first day of employment back in March 2020. He was there for 3 hours before we sent him home with a computer, 2 monitors, pens, paper, basically everything he would need to take Crunch to his house. We had never trained anyone remotely before, and the situation was as daunting for us as it was for him. Following his settling in period of 6 months, we asked Josh, what's next? His answer was that he wanted to move to another department in Crunch. Even after a bizarre 6 months, Josh was focused and determined to let us know that just because he had completed his initial training, he wanted to keep pushing himself to succeed. We adjusted Josh's workload over the following 12 months and arranged cross-department training for him to try out the solutions role, gain knowledge, experience of the work involved, and to get to know the solutions team. Close monitoring and regular chats with Josh were needed, as he was then split between 2 departments. It is with great pleasure that I can confirm that Josh stepped straight into a role within the solutions department as soon as a vacancy came up. With his new position, Josh has increased not only his salary, but also his earning potential. And now I believe we got some time put aside for some questions, if anybody's got any.
Thank you, Kath. We absolutely have. I thought it was really interesting. And I was just thinking about how you talked about confidence being a mask, and when you actually asked the questions, you got direct answers. And that's certainly something that as career guidance practitioners, we see all the time, almost that sense of bravado. We're all fine, but underneath it, we're really not. So I think that was really interesting. And I was juxtaposing that with this thought about how you onboard people always in a virtual environment now, because I know you're going to have people staying working from home. So how do you do that in a way that enables you to really understand that that new recruit is okay and is moving forward comfortably?
Yeah, very, very difficult. You know, obviously before the pandemic, we'd never even thought about doing it. It was like, no, we need to be in the office. We need to be sat next to people. I need to be drawing all over stuff and doing diagrams. So what we needed to do was recreate the safe environment with the managers, with the colleagues, with people who they could lean on for support, the social side of it as well. So having those instant messaging Slack channels has been brilliant. I know from feedback, the videos, the YouTube vids and everything which go flying around there really have made people, you know, come into it. They've had fancy football things going on. They're gaming with each other. And so we have relied on technology, same as everybody else has, but that has been critical to us onboarding staff, making sure they feel comfortable and to get a sense of how they are doing. Because when I speak with them in a one-to-one or review, I'm like, yeah, everything's fine. No, I don't need any support. I'm absolutely fine. But when you dig a little bit deeper and ask them certain little questions, then this mask of confidence starts to come down a little bit. So it is just saying to them, it's okay not to know everything. You know, I've got an 18-year-old daughter and, you know, she thinks she knows absolutely everything and she's known everything for the last 5 years. But I'm seeing that when young employees are coming into work, working with them to let them know, but it's okay not to know everything. That is a challenge in itself, but I feel we are getting there very slowly with a lot of patience, but we are getting there.
Thank you, Kath. And that's clear that your passion for developing those young people, enabling them to follow their passion, is really good as well. I've got a comment from Lynn and a question who said she really enjoyed your presentation. She said, I recognise your workforce age profile, but is there any reason why you couldn't recruit a silver surfer in the same way?
Absolutely no reason at all. We just don't get people applying. We've turned to the Kickstarter scheme because it's really difficult to employ people. I don't look for anybody who's got digital experience. I hire for attitude, personality. I can teach those skills, but we just don't have anybody of the older generation replying to any of our adverts, and we push them out everywhere. Obviously, we work in social, so you can imagine where our adverts are there everywhere, scattered around, but it is only young employees who are, and I don't know what it is. I don't know why, but that is just the way it is.
Interesting. There might be a research project for somebody there as to why that isn't an attraction for older workers, actually. Lorraine said she was just about to ask whether you'd used Kickstarter or not, and you had your answer there, Lorraine. Have you found Kickstarter? Has that been useful for you?
We have done, I think we're on our 4th recruitment drive now for Kickstarters. I've only ever had one application through the Kickstarter scheme. What we are looking to do, because obviously it's very well publicized now, but it is a shortage in the digital industry. What we are looking to do is get about 40 Kickstarters, and we want to start our own digital academy. We want to train people up in the industry. So a 6-month program in line with the Kickstarter scheme, and we want to train people up. We want to give them those skills which are needed, and give them these skills for life and the confidence for them to go out and get work.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you'd think that lots of young people would want to go and join an opportunity using social because of, I know this sounds like a stereotype, but we do see them on the phone a lot, and some of us are similarly quite well attached as well. So what is it, do you think, that's preventing people from actually taking up those Kickstart opportunities and actually making a move forward? Any idea?
I have absolutely no idea. We've tried doing it in Swansea for our first couple of rounds. Now we've actually pushed, I'm going to hold the next one, and we're looking to do our academy in Cardiff, thinking but for transport links there with the valleys and everything, but maybe that will spur people in. But I'm going to go and attend a job fair in the job centre, because we're thinking maybe if we just talk to people, something is obviously putting them off and we don't know why.
Funny you should say that, because Lorraine, who is in DWP, got a senior person in DWP, said perhaps we can link you up with our old worker leads within job centres and get you into our sites to interview candidates.
That would be amazing.
So can I suggest you and Lorraine catch up afterwards, swap details. If you're happy to share them in the general chat, do that, or just PM each other now. You can do that through the chat function. And that might help solve problems for both you as an employer and a whole pile of young people and older people who need an opportunity. That's, I think, brilliant. I think it's a very good place to say thank you. Thank you very much, Kath. I haven't seen any other questions pop through, and we have lost a bit of time this afternoon, so I'm quite keen that we still retain our promise to give you some networking. So I'm going to suggest that we have probably about 7 minutes of networking, put my teeth in, networking now, and pop you into, I think, probably with the size that we have now. I've had a number of apologies come through saying I've got to go for another meeting, whatever, but I suggest that we pop into 2 breakout rooms. Ashley, could you facilitate that for us, please? Probably about 7 minutes in a breakout room, a bit of networking, bit of conversation, and we'll see you back here to wind everything up and just ask you for your feedback on the new format, if that's okay. Ashley, are you okay to sort that out for me?
How many rooms did you want, sorry?
Just 2, I think, will be fine, given the numbers we've got. I think we pop into 2 rooms, and hopefully the CDI vote will be split. See you back here shortly.
You're on mute, Carolyn.
You know, there's always one, and today it was me. Thanks, David. I'm having teased you earlier about it. That was the karma fairy at work right there. Had some useful conversations, I hope, in that breakout experience. I'm just going to share with you. If I put my teeth in, gosh, I've gone all sibilant all of a sudden. I'm just going to share this with you because I wanted to go to that last of the 4 slides about what you thought about this particular format, and I've already got some feedback from people, which I hope you can see. They're talking about what you'll do differently. Discuss it, a bit of green guidance training, share with colleagues and share the presentations. That always warms the cockles of my heart, because it means that what we've been talking about today is stuff that's useful and that will make a difference in the hands of a lot of people outside of the forum itself. So I would encourage you, if you would, just to pop into menti.com. It'll be open for it'll be open till midnight tonight, certainly, and just drop your comments in there about what you found useful and what you didn't. Meanwhile, I'm going to come back to faces because I'm getting a bit tired of staring at PowerPoints and similar. So last thoughts. I know we have David wanted to flag up a couple of bits and pieces. Do you want me to hand over to you, David, for that, about conference and the awards and stuff?
Yeah, super. Thank you. Yeah, just I think it's been a fantastic session. Thank you for that. I think probably a session in 2 parts. I really enjoyed the green discussion. For anyone who's seen my biog, I do things outside of the CDI, which are very environmentally focused. I think the key message was from Lynn, you know, that green isn't a discounted job; it's a premium job. My worry was that, well, are there that many green jobs to go for though? And there's, you know, but it looks like the numbers are increasing rapidly, and you know, 400,000 people being required over the next however many years is good. But also the point about there are green jobs, but there's also underlying skills that will support the green economy. So, you know, the electrical and mechanical engineering, for example. So it may not be in a green job directly now, but it's a skill that will be highly in demand. And then looking at, you know, the impact on young people, and great case study from Kath on what they've done there. So I think it's really interesting pieces. But my only thing on whenever people talk about Gen Y, Gen Z, etc., millennials, is there are trends within the groups, but they are also very individual. And I know, particularly for my kids, you know, Gen Yers, you know, they fit a broad trend, but between them and their friends, you can get much more difference in how they think. So it's remembering to develop it for those individually. I think, Kath, what you've done at Crunch has been excellent. Yeah, just a couple of things. We've got the CDI National Conference on the 9th and 10th of December. The early bird tickets are open until the end of October. You can apply as a member, as a non-member, and we've got a special offer for non-members that if you buy a ticket, then we refund the difference if you become a member by the end of January, if anyone's not yet a member of the CDI. And it's looking really good. Got some great speakers covering the United Nations Sustainability Goals and the links career development has to that. Lynn is a speaker at the event. So we've got you on board, Lynn. Fantastic. We're covering the environment, social justice, decent work, and 6 key areas. So yeah, have a look at the website and that'll be fantastic. And then coming Monday, we're launching the 2022 nominations for the UK Career Development Awards, which will be presented in March. So nominations will be open Monday through until the 17th of December. And then the judging panels will sit and we'll award in March. We are working on it being a face-to-face event with some form of live streaming. We haven't quite confirmed the date for that yet, but it's an opportunity, I think, amongst all the Zoom conference calls and everything for people to get together and have a drink, have a chat, and celebrate the best in careers. Okay,
and also hopefully to cheer again for Wales, because we did phenomenally well in the last Career Guidance Awards the CDI ran. So could we please do that again this year? Please make sure you put your applications in. I want to be able to cheer for Wales and wave. I'm going to do this. I can't believe I'm going to do this, but wave me a little Welsh flag. And it's really important that Wales is represented. We punch well above our weight on the awards side. I'd like to keep that trend going, she said, being very partisan this afternoon. That brings, I think, us neatly to 4:30 and the end of today's Welsh Forum. Thank you very much for coming, and to those of you who stayed right to the end, thank you very much in particular. Please give us your feedback. We hope you've enjoyed it. Next meeting is on, it's a love affair with careers. It's the 14th of February. So after the 14th of February, all the things we love about careers. Don't know what the theme is yet, but we'll pick something that's equally topical like Green has been today. And it's my opportunity just once more to say thank you very much to the 4 speakers. We really appreciate your time, effort, and particularly your contribution. And you've heard and seen, I hope, from everybody on here, how much everybody's valued what you've shared. So thank you very much indeed. I would say safe trip home, safe drive, but it's not very far to the kitchen for the kettle, is it? But it's probably time for tea. So thank you very much again. Diolch yn fawr iawn, and we hope to see you all again at the next forum. We'll send the links round to the presentations and the recording pretty shortly. Take care, stay safe, stay well. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Ashley. Thanks, Kira. Right.